Hi, I'm Steven.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Patrick.
And at this point, we have watched 61 motherfucking horror movies on Netflix. And most of them have been terrible. Would you guys agree with that?
I hesitate to use the word terrible.
Most of them have been trying. And I find it amazing that we are still here today. After 60 movies, we had the energy to watch one more.
We're trying to.
Yeah, we're trying. I mean, there certainly have been some terrible ones. That's fair. But also some surprising ones and individual positive surprises within films. But yeah, the journey does get a little trying at times.
It does, but it's nice when we can take a little vacation from the tropes that we're used to and travel to other countries, attempt to learn other languages by occasionally turning the subtitles off and seeing if you can understand what's going on.
Or just listening to the fucking dub of the movie. Did you guys have...
Mine started with the dub, but
Yeah.
it's because I've been watching Mindhunter with the subtitles on because I'm an old woman, apparently. This week we watched, this was my selection, Under the Shadow.
Yes.
2016 film set in Iran. I don't believe it was filmed there, though.
No.
It's a co-production between Jordan Cutter and the United Kingdom. And it's in Persian.
I think it is produced and stars, at least to some extent, Iranian-born talent, but it was filmed around the world in countries such as Jordan. I don't know if it's possible to go to Iran and make a movie that's as critical of Iran as this movie is.
That's a good point.
But it starts, at least if you leave the default Netflix settings on, with a terrible English dub. So please make sure, unless you're into that sort of thing, that you change your subtitles that you change it to English subtitles rather than just listening to the dub. Because I'm bad at reading lips, and yet in the opening minutes of this film, I was like, something's not right. This shouldn't, because I wasn't sure if it was in English or not. And I was just like, this looks and sounds really weird. And I was like, oh, it's a dub.
Yeah.
It took me 5 seconds, but it was so bad that I watched a couple of minutes of it just because I was
really
enjoying
bad.
it. It's like the voice of our heroine in this movie seems to be the voice of someone 10 years younger than the actress.
I mean, are there any good dubs?
There probably are.
I wish I'd prepared some notes and research for this conversation, but I'm sure there might be some good dubs out there.
This is just another example of Netflix's total abdication of film curation duty, in that most people who turn on this movie probably are never going to go into their settings and set this to the original language with subtitles, because they probably don't even know it's an option.
Well, no. Yeah.
So
This isn't Shudder, Chris.
I watched this. I heard the dub. I said, I got to change this as quickly as possible.
It is interesting that that's the default setting, though. Or it would seem to be.
And it's not like that on every movie either.
No, I thought it was just because, as I mentioned, like I've been watching a show with subtitles on, English subtitles, and I thought maybe Netflix was like catching on to me and thought that this might be the way I prefer to watch it.
Just to brush up on your English a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so that if you miss anything in the spoken dialogue, you can see it on the screen, kind of match up the words.
No, I watch movies and shows very, very late at night, and I like to keep the volume low so I don't upset my neighbors. So I turn the subtitles
That's courteous of you.
on. It is.
You
See,
just
we
get some
horror nerds aren't all bad.
You should just get some good cans, man. Some good headphones.
Yeah.
Does Toby listen to the audio, or does he read the subtitles? This is the big question.
I'll have to ask him, actually.
Okay, please.
Does Toby watch TV? Because most cats don't.
You know what? It's funny that you asked that. He doesn't usually, but there were a couple moments during this where he like would walk by me and like stop and stare at the screen for like 5 minutes and then walk away. I've never seen him do it before.
Well, he wasn't staring at the screen. He was staring at the gin in front of the screen.
Possibly.
Well, what made you pick this movie, Steven? I think you talked a little bit about that on the last episode, but
It's been mentioned on the Shockwaves podcast a number of times over the past few years, and different hosts have brought it up, like, oh, hey, remember that, or this reminds me of Under the Shadow. And so it's just been kind of like lodged in my mind, and then I just realized it was on Netflix. But also, it came to my mind recently because I've been reading this book of short stories called Wounds by Nathan Ballingrud, who's a New Orleans-based horror writer. And the director of this movie made a movie starring Armie Hammer. It's an adaptation of one of those stories, and it sounds really fucking wild. And I didn't think it was going to get released. And I was just like, I IMDb'd it again to see if it had a release date. It didn't. And then I saw Under the Shadow listed as the director's only other credit. So I thought, let's check that out. And lo and behold, 2 days ago, the movie Wounds was announced that it's going to premiere on Hulu next month.
That's the Armie Hammer one?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that will be this director's American debut.
Nice.
So Under the Shadow, what the hell kind of movie are we dealing with?
I feel like before we really get into this movie, we're in like peak spooky season right now.
Yes.
I know Patrick and I have been watching a lot of horror stuff. I don't know about you, Chris, but maybe we should, do you want to briefly talk about what we've been watching?
Dude, I just want to talk about spooky season in general because I wanted to get a fucking jump on it this year. Like, usually I kind of wait until October before I start going fucking nuts on watching horror movies. And this year I was like, let's start early. I mean, because obviously I watch horror movies all year round, but I like that concentrated period where I just go nuts and watch a shitload of them. So I got an early start on it, and at least here where we live in Michigan, it's been warm and not quite fall, but like today it's been gray, it's been gloomy, it's been cold outside, it's been raining, which I hate all those things, but also I'm like, ooh, spooky season has fully kicked in. It has arrived. So I sat down and watched David Cronenberg's Rabid on Shudder today before you guys came over, which was good times. I mean, I saw an asshole grow inside of an armpit, and then a like little phallic stinger thingy came out of it and punctured somebody in the side.
Why would you want to watch that?
It was great. Body horror, man. Body horror.
My body is enough horror.
There can always be more. Body horror is maybe my favorite genre of horror. Bold statement, but I'll have to think about that.
I mean, is it most horror body horror?
No.
Like, I feel like there's psychological horror, and then everything else involves, like, weird shit happening to your body, or the child that came out of your body, or your limbs are getting hacked off.
Well, limbs getting hacked off is not body horror, though. That's slasher or gore or torture porn most of the time. I mean, body horror is more about, like, just weird fucking orifices opening up on your body. And
is that the official definition of the genre?
I think that's the official definition in the dictionary of horror. But yeah, what else did we watch this week? We watched the first episode of Creepshow this week.
On Shudder. Yeah, Greg Nicotero's Creepshow series. And it was half pretty good. Yeah. And half, meh.
Agree.
Yeah, I still need to see all this shit. I've been pretty derelict with watching some horror stuff. I really haven't watched anything. I mean, we're just getting into October now, but I haven't really watched anything spooky recently. A few weeks ago, I watched Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors.
Yes. I've been wanting to rewatch that.
That was fun. Yeah, why not?
How did you... Wait, which Nightmare movies have you seen?
I've seen the original. I've seen Nightmare 2. I've seen Dream Warriors. I've seen New Nightmare. And I've seen Freddy vs. Jason.
Okay, so you've basically seen all the essential ones, in my opinion. How would you rank them?
I don't know if I can. I would have to say, of the ones I've seen, probably the original's the best. Then New Nightmare. Then Dream Warriors. Then... maybe a tie between Nightmare 2 and Freddy vs. Jason.
Nightmare 2 is way too low on the list.
Yeah.
I saw Dream Warriors for the first time last year, and I loved it. I mean, the original Nightmare holds such a special place in my heart because it's literally one of my favorite movies of all time, period, not just horror movies. But I saw Dream Warriors, and I was like, this is a blast. This might be my favorite of the franchise. And Steve and I have been meaning to rewatch Nightmare 2 because I know that movie is wild, but it's been a few years since I've seen it, and I want to get back to it.
It's on Shudder.
No,
I own it.
I think they all...
you have the box.
I own the
They're
blue
all off
box
of Shudder
set.
now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they left Shudder, but he does have the Blu-ray box set, which is pretty good.
All right, what else? We've been having weekly movie horror nights. Chris hasn't been to one yet. I hope he can attend soon, but it happens to be the night that he does jiu-jitsu, I believe. But we did it on Thursday this week, and you still didn't show up, motherfucker.
Yeah, I was watching
Public
this
service
movie.
announcement, Chris is a badass.
I was watching this movie last night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. You had to do your homework.
I had to do my homework.
Oh, Under the Shadow, you mean?
Yeah, but what have we watched so far? Tigers Are Not Afraid,
Yes.
which I'd watched like the night before you guys did, and I caught the ending again. That was much hyped. a movie that's kind of come out a couple years ago. I did not like it.
A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, a movie that you had also seen and then came in for the tail end of.
I had to watch 45 more minutes of it.
Yeah, it was more than the tail end.
That I loved. Another feminist pseudo-Iranian film. Hello, Mary Lou Prom Night 2, which I've been trying to get more people to watch for a very long time.
A blast.
Now, and it's so fun.
Watch that movie and also listen to the episode about it from one of our favorite podcasts, How Did This Get Made? A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, though. Highly recommended. Tigers Are Not Afraid was fine.
Well, what the hell did we watch this week?
Well, we already told you what we watched this week. We watched Under the Shadow. That's
my attempt at a segue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's good.
Chris gets anxious when we talk about things other than the main movie.
Oh, no.
No, I mean, we're talking about movies he hasn't seen. We're talking about movies our listeners probably haven't seen. So this is a really interesting movie. It's set in the final year of the Iran-Iraq War. It's 1988.
Is it really? I don't think it is. Because for some reason I was under that same impression, and I don't know why. But
this is what I read on Wikipedia.
All right, but in the movie, in the first scene of the movie, they talk about how the revolution was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, you're right. I was a little confused about the timeline.
Yeah, so that would put this in the mid 80s.
So, can I make a confession? I didn't know there was an Iran-Iraq war until I watched this movie.
I did, but I didn't really know anything other than the fact that there was one. It's like the longest.
It said it lasted like 8 years or something. It was the longest
armed
war
conflict or something
of the 20th century.
Wait, can you repeat that?
It said it was something about like the longest war of the 20th century or something like that. Which I'm not sure how long Vietnam was, or if they're counting Vietnam in the same way.
Yeah, that didn't seem quite right to me because wasn't it 8 years?
Something like that.
But I feel like Vietnam was longer and other. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Maybe they're saying Vietnam was a conflict. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it was a long war, longer than you'd want a war to be.
Well,
that's for sure. And I knew that it was a war just because I knew that at one point the United States was friends with Iraq because they were fighting Iran. But I did brush up a little bit afterwards, and you don't need to know what the Iran-Iraq War was to appreciate the movie.
I mean, one of the biggest, I don't know, maybe this is kind of shooting my wad too early, but one of the biggest takeaways for me from this movie was just, I don't know, it really drove home the reality of war for me in a way that I hadn't thought about, at least not for a while. I was just like, fuck, like, can you imagine just like trying to live your everyday life and, bombs are falling around your house on a regular basis. They might hit your house,
Then they may or may not explode, apparently.
Yeah.
That was tense as hell.
The basic premise of the movie is we have a family that lives in Tehran. I'm pretty sure it's Tehran, or a suburb of Tehran.
It's Tehran.
And we have a woman named Sheeta, and she lives with her husband, who's a doctor, and their daughter, whose name is Dorsa. The husband is a doctor, and he goes off to be a medic for the army, kind of on the front lines.
Yeah.
They're left alone in the house as Iraq's shelling campaign of the city heightens. And so they're worried about the bombs, and they are worried about paranormal forces that start to seep into the house as the military conflict escalates.
Yeah, and it's a short movie. I mean, it's like slightly under 90 minutes. But it's still a slow burn. There's a lot of interpersonal conflict that like gradually devolves into potential supernatural conflict.
Yes.
Like we open the movie with Sheeta is being basically kicked out of college. She wants to become a doctor like her husband, but apparently she was a little too active during the revolution in Iran, so she's got to go. And then so she's even more upset with her husband that he's going off to be a hero in the war because she wants to be like him. So she gets rid of all of her fucking textbooks, and she's just like left at home with her daughter, like feeling the feminine equivalent of emasculated.
Yeah.
Well, and her husband is not the most supportive person, let's say.
That's true. He's a fucking asshole.
He's quite a bit more straight-laced, and she really had her heart set on going back to medical school, I guess. But she's also, very liberal. And
yes, she is.
She was apparently a left-wing activist during the revolution, which is why she's not allowed to participate in society now.
Right. And she's very liberal to the point that like, she doesn't, there's a lot of scenes of her just like in casual dress around the house. Like she has a contraband VCR and works out to Jane Fonda. But when like the landlord comes to the door, she has to throw on a scarf very quickly to run to the door.
Right.
Well, although, I mean, honestly, that is common in Arab or Arab American life. Like, I mean, if you're just around at home, you don't have a hijab on.
No, but she's like not a woman of faith at all, it seems. It seems like she's very much a skeptic.
Yes.
Or a non-believer. But she's trying to conform, like, at least like as minimally as possible to get by and not to create any more conflict in her life.
She's skirting the rules as much as she can. And I think even there's only 2 other families in the apartment building, and they're kind of farther along on the spectrum of conservatism, I think, if you look at the way they behave and the way that they dress versus the way our hero behaves. And in fact, the landlord says very early on in the movie that Sheeta is the only woman in the apartment who drives, for example.
Oh, that's right.
You know?
Yeah. The garage door is left unlocked, and it must be her.
Right.
There's a lot of terrible treatment, or like subtly terrible treatment of women in this movie.
Yeah, just the treatment you would expect in a theocracy in Iran. That said, I'm not sure. I was trying, and I may have been trying too hard to discern the politics of this movie. And I'll get into this some more in the spoiler room. But even beyond the message of, war is hell and everything, I'm not sure if this is necessarily trying to be a political movie.
You know what? I was gonna do some soul searching and also some research and try and figure out how I felt about that, and I just never got around to it. So I'm curious when we get down to the spoiler room to hear what you have to say.
I mean, I would assume that at least to Iranian audiences, it's fairly radical. I'm sure obviously, there's a reason that this movie was not made in Iran, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, it has some... It builds sympathy for our hero who is persecuted by the theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that alone would be disqualifying in Iran. Other than that, though, I'm not really sure what it's trying to say. I don't know. I like I said, I'm sure it's a political movie. I was just trying the message beyond some general things about war eluded me, and I think it may be trying to just say some things about war and family and some other stuff that I'll get into later, as opposed to really being a movie about the political climate of Iran then or now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I don't think its theme or thesis statement is particularly complex, but I think it's definitely a middle finger to that political climate in Iran.
And that said, though, I think it's impossible to make a movie about this subject matter, about a Middle Eastern family living in perpetual fear that a bomb's going to fall on them, without being conscious of the parallels to the modern day. And when you have a hero who's watching workout tapes starring Jane Fonda, of all possible workout tape stars, I feel like that's a deliberate commentary on America, or possibly, I don't know. It may, well, I'll talk more about, I don't know if this movie actually has sympathy for our hero as a left-wing ideologue.
Really?
Yes. We will talk about that later.
My response to that is also really, but I'm curious to hear more.
We'll talk about it. So I don't know if Jane Fonda is in this movie to kind of satirize Sheeta, or if Jane Fonda is in this movie to make a comment on American military. I don't know.
We'll get into it later. That's
into
fascinating. I hadn't even thought about the fact that Jane Fonda being in this is a little bit loaded.
Yeah. And also,
I just thought it's the 80s and she's working out and shutting the blinds so she can tune out the bombs in the background.
Right. Well, that's what it is
on the surface.
On the surface.
Yeah.
And also, I thought it was quaint when you see the title card at the beginning of this movie, and it says, this is an 8-year war. It's the longest war in the 20th century. Because that just seems so quaint compared to our current campaign in the Middle East, which is 18 years and counting.
Yeah.
But is that more of a conflict?
I don't know.
Well, let's get back into sort of the vibe of this movie. So this is a movie that takes a long time becoming a horror movie, which it definitely is. But there's a lot of.
I would challenge that.
You would?
It's barely a horror movie. There are some horror moments, but it's mostly just a drama, and I mean that's not a knock on it, but it's the horror elements are fairly minimal.
Okay, maybe it's somewhere between drama and horror, which is what we now call apparently even Jordan Peele movies are thrillers.
Elevated horror.
No, we don't
I would
say
not call it
elevated
a
horror.
thriller either.
I think it's a horror movie. I'll go on record and say that.
I think it's a horror movie too. It's got fucking supernatural shit going on. There's a lot of like psychological dread. There are a lot of really creepy dream sequences. We know that Sheeta has had a history of sleepwalking and having troubled dreams, and there are a lot of. I don't even want to call them fake outs, because after the first one, I feel like the filmmaker like knows that you're in a brief dream sequence. There's a lot of really fucking creepy shit in this, though, that you would not see in a traditional drama.
Yes. Horrifying images.
In a drama, are you going to see like the ghost of a dead man like float up and like through a hole in the roof with the drywall closing in around behind him?
I don't know. It took a long time. It's at least a half hour, 45 minutes before anything even remotely horror-y happens in this movie.
I don't know. There's a sense of dread, at least for me, starting very early on, and not just because of the living being under the shadow of the bombs, but the first good scare is kind of funny because it's Toast coming out of a toaster.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I don't.
I do.
Or at
I
least
remember
it
being
didn't
like
hit
really
me
a
as scare.
Toast jump scare, but this is a movie about like, I mean, this is gonna sound kind of cliched, but I got a very like Polanski vibe from this movie. Like this movie is about like sort of the quiet horrors of domestic life.
That's a
as
good
much as it's about
comparison.
anything else. Like there's a lot of like not only Rosemary's Baby but Repulsion in this movie. They had to be influences on this.
I mean, the whole movie takes place in an apartment.
yeah, which is why I was like reluctant to be like, oh, it's like Polanski because it's in an apartment and the apartment trilogy. But no, I really do think that like the way that he makes us feel not comfortable, but the way that he makes us like familiar with the space, the framing, and again like the toast and these little domestic details that you can taste and smell as much as see. That seems very Polanski to me.
Ray, remind me, what's the toast?
Well, there's toast in a couple scenes, but the first time you see it,
There's a lot of bread and a lot of toast, actually. This movie made me hungry and also sleepy because that's a lot of carbs.
I remember her giving the daughter toast,
Yeah.
but I don't remember it being scary.
Dorsa at the beginning of the movie starts to hint that she's been seeing things at night, or she's scared to sleep in her bed or something, and there's kind of a musical cue that builds up tension, and then there's a hard cut to Toast coming out of the toaster. And they just kind of drop that dread in the last scene and spook you. It's kind of a jump scare where it's just cutting quickly to Toast.
What is it with toast? There's plastic toast in this movie, too, when they
There
have the little
is.
tea party scene.
I don't know.
And I remember being like, oh my God, first of all, I love the lead actress of the movie. I think she's absolutely amazing.
She's wonderful.
Her range is incredible. She's so like sympathetic even when she's like going out of her fucking mind. But well, like the thing that impressed me the most is the way that she so convincingly made it look like she took a bite out of the plastic toast to entertain her daughter.
I thought she was great. Let me make a confession. I watched this movie last night, and then I watched most of it again today.
Wow.
And she's
Why?
better the second time. Because I felt... Well, I'll get into that.
You got so much for the spoiler room.
We'll get into that. This is a movie that left me very satisfied, but kind of with a lot of questions, especially about the kind of intentions of the movie. And I kind of wanted to watch, first time you watch a movie is a flirt, second time's a date. It made me curious. I wanted to understand it more. So I wanted to watch it again as soon as I finished it the first time. And it's a short enough movie that you can almost do that. So,
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, so I think we can talk about the sort of the main inciting incident of this movie, which we haven't touched on at all, which is there's kind of a horrifying air raid on their neighborhood, and a huge bomb drops on their apartment building, cracks the plaster ceiling of our hero's apartment, and fully like is just like sitting in the living room of the apartment above them, like this huge fucking bomb. Am I using the right term there? Is that a bomb?
A missile, rocket,
whatever. Yeah.
Big cone head.
And it's just sitting there like it might go off, it might not. Very tense scene.
They seem it was very tense. Like, and I love just like the image of like our protagonist's like ceiling cracking too, and like that being just like another detail she has to live with. There's a lot of like putting X's of tape on windows in this, and a lot of these like little details about like how just like the weird kind of routine maintenance you have to do living in an area like this that's constantly being bombarded.
Which was another interesting thing to me. I don't know. There was some weird, and I think it's just illustrating my own class privilege. But I was like, wow, this seems like a fairly upper class family. Like they're nicely dressed. The dad is a doctor, whatever. Why would their building be getting bombed? And it was very sort of jarring to me to be like, oh, well, yeah, why wouldn't their building be getting bombed?
Right.
So the bomb's hanging there, and one of the neighbors has
Heart attack. He's dying.
well, he has a heart attack, but also was it his wife or who was it that starts to infect Dorsa with the idea that there might be a djinn?
The little
he
boy.
saw a djinn before he died. Is it the little boy?
they get it a lot of different ways.
There's a little mute boy who hasn't spoken since. What was the
His
traumatic
parents
thing that happened
died.
to him?
His parents died in a battle.
And he gives her he gives Dorsa, the little girl, a ball of cat hair, which
Yeah.
Is supposed to protect her, I think.
Is that
Great.
what it is?
Yeah.
Sort of.
So great to know.
It's also
You're
called
afraid
a
of Jinn.
Bezoar.
just grab
is
a
what that's
hairball.
called.
Yeah. Go pet
Oh,
your
a
cat.
Bezoar, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't put that together.
I don't know what term they use for it in Persian, but that was fucking creepy. Like it takes a lot. Kids are fucking weird, and there was something about the way that Dorsa told the story about the boy whispering to her, and then us learning that he doesn't speak. And I was just like, God, that's so weird. Like, what do little kids talk about when adults aren't around? Like, they have got these like very malleable brains, and they, believe that their fantasies are real.
It's like Toy Story. What happens when we leave the room?
Yeah, but it gradually that scene legitimately gave me chills. I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know if I want to see what this boy looks like. I don't even know how to explain it. It just got to me for some reason.
Huh.
Yeah.
Turns out he's really fucking creepy looking.
Well, he's not creepy looking, but he's got an intense look.
I would not.
Which
call
I
him
found creepy.
looking.
Yeah. It's but this, yeah. Creepy look. Beautiful child.
Gorgeous child.
Gorgeous child. The best child.
Props to his parents. They raised a fine one.
But yeah, this missile seems to start bringing an evil presence, a djinn, to the building.
It's
Well, does it or doesn't it? It's
does
very
it
much.
or doesn't it?
It's very much. I mean, a film that I could not stop thinking about after about a third of the way through this movie is The Babadook, which is also a film that is about. In that case, I believe she's a widow, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about a woman and her very taxing, stress-inducing child just trying to get through day to day in a pretty unforgiving society. And in The Babadook, it can go either way. Was it a shared fantasy or did this actually happen? You don't really know until the end. It almost plays like a parable or a fairy tale. And this movie, I felt, had a very similar vibe. Is this happening because our protagonist is there's something about, she's slightly psychologically unstable. She has troubled sleep, she's sleepwalking, and she's going mad because of all the stress and the failure that she's experienced, and she's choosing to believe that what the child is saying is true? Or did it really happen? Was there really a djinn? I have no idea.
I feel exactly the same way. I watched it, and I watched it another half time, and I still, again, the director's intentions still elude me a bit. But I find myself doubting whether or not there was actually paranormal stuff in this movie, or if it was just a metaphor or a shared fantasy or what. I think it's clearly metaphorical somehow.
Yeah. Well, and especially because, we've talked about how our protagonist she's very liberal. She's a very logical person. She doesn't really seem to be a very spiritual person. For her to believe that there's actually a djinn, it almost seems like psychologically a convenient way of her dealing with this very terrifying struggle of not knowing if her husband's alive or not understanding her child, not being able to process the fact that she can't have the career that she deserves to have, living in a place where bombs are dropping all the time. It seems like it's easier to believe the child's fantasy of this magical, supernatural somewhat malicious and oppressive being around than to face the day-to-day reality. Like, one of the reasons I love horror movies is because I believe what Joe Dante has said many times, that a monster is a metaphor, and that it's a lot easier to process trauma through like an imagined fear than it is to process the actual trauma itself, like the day-to-day grind of living with it.
Yeah.
That
was more of a speech than I expected it to be.
No, I think that's pretty profound. And this is a movie I deliberately avoided looking up any interviews or anything that might demystify it for me, because I think thinking about this movie and deciding what it means to you is a lot of fun. It's been fun for me over the last 24 hours.
Clearly, you almost watched it twice in one night.
And I would not want to spoil that with, a quote-unquote definitive answer to what the jinn were and what they meant and if they're there. One thing it meant to me, I was thinking about haunted house movies. And what's the real terror of living in a haunted house? It's really, I think, the stripping away of the security of your home. And war, like we see in this movie, does the same thing. So whether it's jinn or whether it's your fear that the place is going to get bombed tomorrow, you just don't feel safe in your home.
A jinn is like something you can potentially negotiate with. You can't negotiate with a bomb.
You can't negotiate with Saddam from your one-bedroom apartment.
You said you didn't want to spoil, and I don't remember what the rest of that sentence was, but I think we should review this because we're getting pretty deep.
Well, hold on.
Oh, okay.
Before we do that, I want to weigh in on this conversation. I find it fascinating that you two both had such a complex experience with this film and are still like chewing over what it means. I had no such qualms about whether it was real or whether it was a figment of their imaginations. I wasn't really thinking about that. I think I mostly took it at face value. And I don't really think it's that original to have, a monster or ghost or whatever be a representation of trauma or war. I mean,
right.
Pan's Labyrinth, you can name a zillion examples of that trope. And that's not a knock on this film. We're going to get into that in just a second when we all review it. But I didn't see as much complexity in it as you two did. But it is interesting to me hearing you guys talk about the experience.
And I've also been asking myself why I've been looking for that extra level of complexity and why I believe it's there, even though I don't really understand it. Because we've watched a lot of movies where I get to the end and I'm like, I can kind of feel some themes. I don't really know what this means. I think it was poorly executed. This movie, I feel the same way, but I don't feel it was poorly executed. I feel like I'm not smart enough.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like there's something here. There's something very deliberate here, and I can't put my finger on it yet, but give me enough time, and maybe I can figure it out.
See, this seemed like a very simple movie to me. And again, that's not a criticism. It just seemed fairly straightforward.
So I don't know why I give this movie the benefit of the doubt that I don't give to other movies, or why I don't give those movies the benefit of the doubt.
Because it's more convenient to revisit. It's short.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just because the craftsmanship of the movie was so strong throughout and the characters were so strong throughout that I convinced myself I was watching a good movie where all this stuff would make sense. I don't know.
You know what? Let's review it, and we'll get deeper into that after we head down to the spoiler room. I'll go first since I picked this movie. I'm going to give it a view it. There's no reason not to watch this movie if what you've heard so far sounds intriguing to you, because it is really short. I mean, I wouldn't say it's exactly a breeze. It does feel kind of the way I felt about Tigers Are Not Afraid. It does feel like a bit long for how short it is. It's a little bit, it's very deliberately paced, but it's a fascinating movie, and I'm with Chris. I did feel that there were some things in it. There were a lot of like jump scares and stuff but somehow they worked, and I couldn't understand why they worked where they don't in like a Blumhouse movie. And I think it's because I was really interested in our protagonist. I found her to be a really sympathetic, engaging character that seemed to have some secrets, and I was interested in learning more about her. And it did seem like a very deliberately crafted movie, even if I don't know exactly what the intended message was. It's one that I'll definitely revisit at some point in the future. So, view it.
And I think, just for the record, we should note this is like your sixth view it in our entire
I thought it was like maybe the third.
Oh, okay, never mind.
I want to jump in on that point about jump scares, because I think jump scares maybe get unfairly maligned because there's so many movies that ride on the jump scares and have little else going for them, jump scare movies, or movies that prioritize jump scares at the expense of other things.
Like
and you know what?
characterization.
Patrick's smirking at me. I'll include Insidious.
I'm only smirking because I saw Insidious on Netflix earlier today, and I was like, oh, I gotta watch that again soon.
Yeah. So like, Insidious is a movie that definitely is jump scare focused
And fine.
and it's fine.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
We've seen a lot of movies on this show that
Insidious Chapter 2 jump scared me within an inch of my life. Like, I almost left the theater because I couldn't handle anymore, but I loved it.
Right,
it was great.
Right. And they have it down to a science.
Yeah.
But I think we're used to watching a lot of movies that it's just waiting for the next jump scare and there's nothing interesting going on. And I think every horror movie should have a jump scare. At least one.
Well, because life has them. I mean, like, there's so many. I mean, for real. Like, how many times?
Life is a jump scare.
How many times have you just like, you're like looking at your phone, you go to walk into like a public bathroom and you push open the door and there's somebody like coming out at the same time you're coming in, like, ah!
Yeah.
Like almost drop your phone and you get like scared for a moment.
Sure, it's fun. There's no reason.
It's a funny example, but like,
I do that every time Chris walks into my apartment. Ah!
well, we did today when the fucking buzzer went off. There's
true.
a great example.
Every time the buzzer goes off in my apartment is a
I
jump
felt
scare.
Visceral terror when that thing went off.
I feel like we should record that at the beginning of the spoiler room just to give the listening audience a taste of what the buzzer in my apartment sounds like. 'Cause it's horrifying.
It's pretty spooky. Maybe I can find a way to weave it into our sample and weave it into our theme song.
Yeah, you need to write a new theme song for the spoiler room with my apartment buzzer in it.
Sure, why not? Okay, I'll go next, unless Patrick wants to go next.
No, go ahead.
All right, I'm also going to give it a view it. I really enjoyed watching this movie. I found it was very interesting. I think there's a lot of different ways to appreciate this movie. You might just find its depictions of Iranian life in the 80s interesting. You might find the family drama interesting. You might just like the fucking scary shit that shows up in this movie. It reminded me a lot of The Babadook, which I love. It also reminded me a bit of A Dark Song, which of course we love, just in kind of the slow boil, kind of they're bottled in, and the way that the scares kind of came, made me think of that movie a couple times. I thought it was very interesting. I don't know what else to say about it. I'll talk more about it in the spoiler room. View it. Patrick.
So, lots of interesting milestones happening today because it's rare that...
You're going to screw it, aren't you?
No, I'm not going to.
Okay.
Let me give my fucking rating. It's rare that I'm more negative than you two, and it's also rare that I'm the dissenting voice. Yeah. Like, usually me and Chris are sort of on the same level, or me and Steven are on the same level, but tonight you guys are on the same level.
That's happened before.
I'm not so... Well, it's
not in the review
rare.
necessarily.
I would say
but
it's
in the
rare.
conversation.
Not to rehash that, but the split here and the way I feel about this movie has reminded me of Cargo. Because that was a movie that I thought similarly. I can feel a theme here. I don't know what it's going for, and I don't like it.
Yeah,
this is a movie where I feel there's a theme. I don't know what it's going for, but I love it.
Also, fuck that stupid baby.
But also rare because usually when I am that dissenting voice, like when I'm going it alone, I'm usually more positive, and tonight I'm more negative, which is interesting. So I'm going to say cue it, and that's just and I hesitate to say that because it's not a knock on the movie. It's a good movie, good performances, nicely made. I can't endorse it as a horror movie. It didn't spook me that there are some good spooky moments later in the film, and it just comes so late. And I want to compare it briefly to 3 different movies. A Dark Song freaked me the fuck out way earlier in the movie and just put me at a great sense of dis-ease much earlier.
Yeah.
I want to encourage people, if you're thinking about watching something along these lines, that deals with that is a film set in Iran that deals with some of the politics of Iran. Watch A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which I just watched, and also has like a slow pace, but has more of the mood that I'm looking for out of a horror film. And the third one is The Babadook, which also just built incredible creepy atmosphere and freaked me the fuck out, in addition to the thematic shit that it was doing. So I can't criticize this movie in any sense. It was a little in one ear and out the other.
It didn't turn the dial.
It didn't turn the dial that much.
I'll agree that the first half of this movie, at least, isn't especially scary. There's a lot of generic, like, creepy kid is seeing something at night. What is it? Oh, I'm waking up in the middle of the night. What's going on? Stuff that we see in a lot of Z-grade movies on Netflix. So,
yeah. You're waiting a while for something to happen, which is fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
But there were some things that fucking terrified me.
There are a couple of really spooky moments that we should discuss in the spoiler room, probably, right?
I already mentioned one of them, but there's one visual in this that, like, I literally jumped out of my seat slightly.
I wanted to look away from the fucking screen at some of this shit.
All right.
Wow.
Let's go to the spoiler room.
Wow.
All right, go watch
Where we
this damn movie
spoil
if you want to,
everything.
or follow us down the stairs to the spoiler room.
All right, welcome back to the show. It's me and Patrick down here in the spoiler room, getting ready to spoil everything.
Where the fuck is Chris?
He's on his way. He had to grab a drink or something. Oh, Jesus Christ. Every fucking time. Oh.
Man, that fucking buzzer. We were telling you guys about the buzzer before, and we weren't fucking kidding. Now, here comes fucking Chris. Oh, man. Chris sounds scary.
Jesus, Chris. What is all those fucking chains? You the ghost of Christmas past or something?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it goes to Halloween future.
Oh, well, welcome.
Thanks for scaring the shit out of us.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
All right, so we're back talking about...
Did I miss anything? Did you already spoil it?
We didn't spoil anything. I just said we're getting ready to spoil
Perfect.
everything.
Perfect. I'm ready.
Okay, so we're back talking about Under the Shadow. What's left to cover here, guys?
Well, okay. The basic arc of this movie is, we told you how it starts. You know, they're in the house. Father's gone off to war. Creepy things escalate. Basically, they just get persecuted by Jinn. Everyone else in their apartment building flees town. They're the last ones in the building. We reach peak creepy shit. And then they... fuck. I can't do it. I can't do it.
All right, we got kind of a save the cat thing going on.
There's a
here.
lot of stuff going on in this movie that we haven't even talked about, like the doll and all
Right.
that stuff.
So Dorsa has a doll that she believes has been taken by the Jinn.
Yes.
And she's trying to get her mom to go upstairs to get her. Her mom doesn't believe it. And that's really kind of what keeps them in the apartment for a while as Sheeta's mind is unraveling.
For a long time. Now, we hear from one of the neighbors that the Jinn, what they'll do is they'll take your favorite object. And once they have that, you are Jinn bait, baby. You will never be free of them. That's what the neighbor says. You will never be free. They'll always know how to find you once they have that shit that you love.
Well, they make it easy to be found by not leaving the apartment for a considerable length of time.
Right.
At one point, they do try to escape, and then they just end up back because...
well, they flee in a panic. I don't even know if they're really trying to escape as much as they flee in a panic.
They flee in a panic, but Sheeta is not wearing her chador, and so they get caught by the
Which we
pilot.
should clarify is like the headscarf.
It's a headscarf with the open face.
Or even her robe. She's wearing her like tank top still at this point.
She's wearing her Jane Fonda workout wear, which is great for running. Actually, it's very, I feel, purposeful, perhaps on accident. So anyway, they get caught by the cops, and they wind up in the police precinct waiting room, and the female attendant is like trying to convince the police chief to let him off the hook. And there's a great shot. It's a wide shot of the police chief or whoever he is with his walkie-talkie with this absurdly long, flexible antenna, and he's wagging it at Sheeta, and it's bouncing back and forth, and he's telling her, basically, like, this is completely inappropriate and disrespectful. Our men are becoming martyrs for our faith, and
Yes.
you would walk out here looking like this, but then he lets him off the hook and sends him back to the apartment. But I love that moment of just, like, seeing this, like, towering man. He kind of reminds me of the guy who plays Bill Tench in Mindhunter, just, like, comically wagging this walkie-talkie at her as, like, a power move.
Yeah.
And then they wind up back, and that's when the search for the doll ensues.
So, I don't know. I guess I'll use that to segue to my main dilemma about... And I don't really care one way or another, but when I said I wasn't sure if the movie condoned Sheeta's left-wing attitudes, I was trying to figure out this movie's intentions, and so I said, okay, what's different about these characters at the end of the movie from the beginning of the movie? And that's one of the reasons I restarted it. So, I don't know, what would you guys say is the difference in the characters at the end of the movie?
I mean, in the end, they do leave voluntarily. Sheeta has, in a very kind of surreal sense, like confronted the specter of her domineering mother. And is her mother domineering? Am I getting that wrong?
I don't know. It's so she at the beginning of the movie really wants to be a doctor. Her husband, who seems more conservative than she is, accuses her of just wanting to please her dead mother.
That's true. She's like, because there's a great line. He says like, that was your mother's dream, not yours. And she said, dead people don't dream.
Right.
I love that.
Right, which sounds like a Bailey School Kids book. But her most prized possession is her like dictionary of medical terminology that her mother got her and is signed to her, and she keeps that in a special locked drawer, even though she throws all her other medical books away at the beginning of the movie. And for much of the beginning of the movie, she is very upset that she's not going to be a doctor. She's very sensitive about all the persecution she feels from her husband and other forces in her life that are accusing her of not making herself out to be something.
I love this because I think I get it now. I did not know, or did not realize that the show door at the end of the movie that becomes animated and basically fills the entire basement. It's like the CGI is a little bit wonky, but it's still a really cool effect and a great idea. So the Jinn takes something that is like very personal to you so that they always know where you are. They've taken Dorsa's doll, and they have taken Sheeta's mother's Shodor and
Shador.
Shador.
Well, they took the book. We don't know if they took the...
Well, but it uses it against her, and she has to confront it. And I feel like it's a way of her, like her having to confront this demon in this form is like her way of like reclaiming, like, fuck you, husband. Like, this was important to my mother, and it's important to me, and I'm going to take control of my narrative.
Yeah, I mean, that's the obvious change for me. It's just her taking agency and getting the fuck out of the house. And
Okay.
Giving the fuck you to everybody.
And the Jinn is like trying to remind her of like what the husband side on this is, and she's like, no, like, give me back my mother's garment. You know, it's like something I treasure, and I treasure her memory, and I still want to live to, you know, to potentially impress her.
I mean, especially like the culminating moment of this movie is her just putting the car in reverse and crashing through the garage door that this conservative dipshit who runs the apartment building has been berating her about leaving the door open all movie. Like, I mean, to me, it's very obvious that it's just like, okay, she's finally, like, she's not taking the shit from anybody anymore. She's doing what's right for her and her daughter, and she's getting the fuck out.
And we don't know where she's going. The last shot of the movie is kind of ominous, too, but I think it does symbolize a form of escape, of breaking through the proverbial, I mean, not glass ceiling, but I feel like the image kind of does conjure that.
Well,
that
okay.
idiom.
So if we accept that the Jinn is wearing the same garb as the mother, who we only see in a photograph, which is what you guys are telling me, and I accept that, then I can see the, you know, final climax where they're in the basement, and it's just, you know, it's a sensational poltergeist sort of demon that all you can see is this you know,
this billowy garment that seems to fill
thing.
the entire basement.
Right.
It becomes a jungle of sorts.
I can see the ending working and her actually standing up to her mother or her baggage from her mother. But I felt that at the end of this movie, she doesn't want to be a doctor anymore. And I thought that at the end of the movie, the difference is that she is actually now being the loving mother that she was supposed to be, and her husband told her to be, and everyone else in her life told her to be. Because at the beginning of the movie, she's not.
I don't like that at all.
I don't like it.
That's really problematic.
This is what, you know, problematic or not, you watch this movie again, she's not a great mother at the beginning of this movie.
No, she's kind of terrible.
She's kind of terrible. She's very much preoccupied with her own problems, her own ambitions. And I think at the end of the movie, she's kind of given up those ambitions, and she's leaving the house like her husband told her to. She's letting the kid sit in the front seat with her, loving the kid, confessing her love to the kid, like she should have been doing the whole movie. So that's why I say I'm not sure the movie really condones her.
What are you talking about? The husband told her to leave the house.
He did. He's like, why are you still there? There's bombs going off. Like, he he like gives her a warning that Tehran is going to become
and the husband,
target.
I think, maybe is also important because he's a doctor. And what's the movie's criticism of him? Does you ever see him saving lives? No. He goes off to be a soldier, basically, and fight in this never-ending war that's just causing nothing but pain to everybody.
The question is, where's she going at the end of the movie?
We don't know. Who knows? And this is the kind of stuff that bothers me. I don't know if the movie's trying to critique her attitude at the beginning. To me, it says, all right, in extreme circumstances, when there's war, like, there's more important things than trying to climb the social ladder or whatever. Love your kid. Stick with your kid. It's the two of you against the world when the shit's going down. Maybe that's the intention.
Man, the more we talk about this, the more I do want to watch it again because it is so fascinating. A lot of this movie is about, like, either suffering the effects of or rejecting the patriarchy. So I would like to think that this movie has a feminist, that the ending has a feminist quality to it. I don't know if it does. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because this is not like a superhero origin story where suddenly she has a magical power at the end of it, but I think she has a greater sense of self and that she feels free of some of the bonds that she was carrying with her before, right? Like, she's accepted the fact that in this country, I can't be a doctor, but I can be a good mother. There's actually a really cute moment where she finally finds the doll in a drawer and it's dismembered. Yes. And the girl sees it and it's like slightly horrifying to see the girl's reaction. And the mom immediately quells the girl's fears and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor." And she puts it back together. She sews it back together and then the girl is happy. So I feel like she realizes that, like, whatever qualities could make me a doctor, like, I like to save people's lives or to help people or comfort them. Like, I guess I'm just going to have to exercise those qualities in a different way because I can't do that under this regime.
Mm-hmm. And also,
and I mean, to me, the theme couldn't be more clear. I mean, she's confronting the djinn takes the form of this garment that oppresses her and frustrates her throughout the movie anytime she has to put it on. And specifically, it's the same garment that we see her mom wearing in pictures. We know her mom couldn't realize her dream of being a doctor, so she's literally confronting the oppression of her society and the oppression that made her mother's life even more difficult than hers is, and seemingly conquering that oppression. But in the end, there's still the question that it may still be haunting her because the djinn still has the book and it still has the doll.
Yes.
And the oppression is going to haunt her because she can't. I mean, like in the real world, she still can't live her dream. She has to adjust her. Yeah. She has to adjust her aspirations to fit the society unless she chooses to move. And one of the neighbors does move to France to stay with their child. So, like, that option is there for her too. But that was very well put, Patrick.
To me, it couldn't be more clear that that the film does sympathize with her. The writers do sympathize with her. We're meant to sympathize with her, but yeah, it's going to be difficult for her to shake this. And not even in like a Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy actually is the car closing back over you sort of way.
Thank God.
But there's a deeper thematic resonance to the fact that the final shot of the movie is the book. The djinn still has the book, and it still has the doll.
That's, oh my God. Like, I guess I was so spellbound by this movie, and there's a lot to unpack, and it does throw a lot of curveballs and all that information at you. I wondered while watching, like, why is the book important? Why are we watching the pages turning? I get it now.
And I was wondering, I think that you're right about with your interpretation, quote unquote, right. I was also wondering though, if maybe now that they are their new selves and they are, free and they're off driving in the car, if the book and the doll are that important anymore, because the doll throughout the movie is kind of a stand-in for a parent.
Yeah.
The husband, who's the more buttoned down of the two, gave her the doll so it could protect her because he had a lack of confidence in the mother.
And is her aspiration to become a doctor a manner of escape as well, or escapism? Like, because in the end, I think it works both ways. That, like, when I saw the book lying on the ground, I thought, oh, she's left that life behind. That's it. I did not put together, like, oh, the djinn, the theoretical djinn that I don't know if it exists or not, but it seems to for her, is still holding on to that, and like that is going to haunt her.
I mean, it is ambiguous, right? Like, we never see the djinn again, but I feel like there has to be some significance that I'm pretty sure I mean, I know the final shot of the movie is the book. We see the book again, and I'm pretty sure the second to last shot is seeing the doll again.
Yes.
And I don't know why else we would go back to that other than to drive home the fact that, hey, you didn't defeat the djinn. The djinn still has your shit.
But we
I think
also
it's
see
important.
the absolute final shot is the camera panning up to the hole in the roof.
Yes.
Right. So are we to? And I think it is kind of a double-edged sword. It's like, oh, we've escaped. However, the djinn is going to slip through this hole and follow us and confront us again at some point in time with this struggle. Elements of the struggle that we've had. We're going to carry this through us for the rest of our lives. It's not going to be an easy road for either of them, especially our heroine. She's had to deal with the fact that, like, okay, she's finally accepted, I can't be a doctor. So what do I do? Who knows? Does she leave the country?
Do we know that she's accepted that, though? I don't know. You
I
guys
think
have referenced this, and I'm not sure there's anything that specifically clued me into her having accepted not being able to do that.
I think just those visuals are meant to communicate that that's what we're supposed to believe about her. That she's left the book behind. It's not important.
I don't know. All these objects are functioning, I think, at so many different levels.
Yeah.
Both textually and thematically. That I'm a little frustrated just because I can't really make sense of it. Everything you're saying to me, Patrick, makes sense. I also think you can also read it so it's those things aren't left behind in an ominous way. They're just left behind in a we're moving on with our lives. We no longer need the one last remaining vestige of my medical career, and we also don't need the pseudo parent stand-in. We're leaving that behind.
To me, though, the book, I mean, she didn't need that book to become a doctor.
No.
But it's symbolic.
The books, I think, clearly symbolizes that ambition. Especially because it
came from her mother.
Especially because the signed inscription in the front is her mother saying, or you could say it represents her mother's expectations of her. I don't know, that is actually the same thing.
I think, and again, I'd have to watch it again. But like this has been on my mind for the last 15 minutes or so. Like, I think that because there's like a couple of very loaded confrontations with her husband where he says some really truly awful stuff to her, but I think some of it's kind of true, or at least it's stuff that she hasn't processed. Like, I think she's holding on to her mother's memory in a way that is possibly unhealthy, and yes. I think she's very liberal. Her mother, at least from the little bit that we see of her, seems to have been kind of conservative, but had a hope of becoming something more, and then she's trying to take it a step further. This is kind of how it happens with generations, especially generations that are steeped in sort of religious devotion or fanaticism. It's like you kind of take baby steps, and the next generation is going to get a little bit further. I think she's still wrestling with whether or not this is really her dream, or if it's symbolic to her that she should, become liberal, but also live out the dream that her mother had and wasn't able to realize. I wonder if that's in there if I watch it again. I don't think it's clear for sure, but it might be intentionally unclear.
And there may be an interview with the director where he says, this is exactly what I meant.
Which I would not be interested in that, actually.
Right.
I don't like those sorts of easy answers, because what I love about this kind of movie, and one of the reasons I gave it a view, is because there is so much open to interpretation, and I feel intentionally so. If not, I'll be very disappointed. But we've had a pretty wide-ranging discussion with 3 pretty different viewpoints on this movie, and I think there's something valid in each of those interpretations.
I mean, I have to say, I came into this episode going, and we say this sometimes before we start an episode, we'll be like, I don't know what we have to say about this movie, and then we end up talking for a fucking hour or whatever anyways. Yeah. And this was kind of one of those where, for me, like I said in my review, I enjoyed it. I didn't dislike anything about it. It was just kind of in one ear, out the other, and I did not expect to have this rich of a discussion about it, and I think it's been a great discussion.
I think so too. And something I want to bring up that I feel is kind of inescapable because I invoked the Babadook earlier is let's compare the ending of this movie to the ending of the Babadook. Or maybe not compare, but let's at least consider, because I do feel like the final act of both of these films are very similar. The Babadook is more cartoonish, but the Babadook has a pretty complicated ending as well. There are multiple implications of how that film ends and what it means for the characters, and it's left up for you, to the viewer, to decide, were the fantastical elements real, or does it even matter? What's more important is, what do the experiences that we saw these two characters go through, what do those mean for their future? And we simply don't know. We get a very brief glimpse into, the end of the Babadook, right? They've got the creature in the shed, and they have to feed it, and it's like this thing. It's like
it's always going to be there, but they can manage it.
They can manage it, but it's always going to be there. And I feel like that's what the end of this movie. Yeah. That's where the djinn lies at the end of this movie.
Yeah, it's
going to come back to haunt them, but they've defeated it once. They can manage it. They're moving forward regardless.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
This movie has there's a lot more loaded into the end of this movie, again, because of especially these objects. I'm amazed at the weight that these very simple objects have.
Mm-hmm. When she opens the drawer and the doll's been cut up, I was horrified.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I saw the girl cut up.
Really?
Yeah.
I wasn't horrified, but I was like,
"You killed her! You killed her!" And again, if we're talking about whether or not there's djinn in this movie, I don't know. And even the mom says at the end, she doesn't know if she cut up the doll herself or not.
Because that possibility is thrown out, and she's like, I don't know.
Maybe the djinn maybe they're all just going fucking crazy and doing crazy shit. I don't know. On that note, another detail I liked is early on in the movie, you see that Sheeta, especially when she's upset about something, becomes very orderly. When she's fighting with her husband, she's like, she sorts all the glasses in the cabinet.
Yeah.
Ascending I didn't even realize order that. Of heights.
And puts all Doris's toys back.
Puts
up
all
on
the toys away.
While they're arguing.
And then...
At the end of the movie, she just tears it all down.
And then she's arguing with her... Well, yeah, exactly. When she's arguing with her husband again, even though she just did the glasses, she opens the cabinet, takes the glasses back out, and starts sorting them again on the counter and putting them back in, even though it's already been done.
Oh, I didn't even realize
That's her tick. She's very orderly. And then, of course, as the movie goes on and everyone's getting more frantic, she basically tears the place apart from floor to ceiling.
Very upsetting. I really like the oddly satisfying subreddit of just pencils being made and things fitting together perfectly. Yeah. And this movie, the last third of it is the opposite of that. It's like watching this very orderly house being very upsettingly trashed.
I just did not have the visceral reactions to this that you guys did, other than to the ghost Shador running around. That was a spooky visual, and the first time I saw it, I was like, wait, what the fuck? I literally ran it back because I sort of doubted what I had just seen. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, that's cool. It's CG, and it's not the best CG, but it's a unique visual that stuck with me and spooked me.
That I loved, and I'm glad you appreciated that. And it's not great CG, but the concept is so great. The emotional impact of that scene is so great. And now, after this discussion, I feel like I would feel even more so.
Guys, what they really should have done? India's not that far away. They should have called Jay.
Oh, Jay would have come and solved everything immediately.
Mm-hmm.
The most horrifying image in this movie for me was the perversion of the painting that she sees in the landlord's apartments.
I don't remember this.
So she goes up to her landlord's apartment, talks to the landlord's wife, and they are maybe the more conservative family in the
building.
Oh yeah,
yes. And then there's
oh man, I hated that woman. That woman was so
well, we don't hate any women on this podcast.
She was snide and so bitchy. That character was a real handful.
Well, she's in the landlord's conservative home talking to the wife, and she looks over on the wall and she sees this painting.
Can you show that to us?
Yes, because I was so curious. I was like, the key to this movie may be, what the hell is this painting? So
it's like Midsommar, where the painting in the beginning tells you everything that's going to happen.
Oh, spoiler alert.
Oh, okay.
That painting. So I took a picture of it with my phone.
Wait, bring that closer.
I don't remember that at all.
she looks over. It's just for a beat during their conversation.
Creepy, though.
And she looks at it. And I said, what is this painting? So I took a picture of it on my phone and Google image searched it. And was able to find out what that painting is. That's a recreation of a painting by Joshua Reynolds, who was a 18th century English painter. And it's of the biblical figure Samuel. And that was the first thing that made me curious, because you can tell it's a European style painting of a biblical figure of some sort. And so I thought maybe it was an indication that, like, the landlord's family are maybe closet Christians or something. Maybe that's why they were showing that to us. But then later on, during the horror section of this movie, she goes into the room that's been bombed out, and there's a child. It may even be her own child, or a vision of her own child, but looking very much like this Samuel, praying with a ghastly, horrifying look on the face, looking up to the hole where the bomb came through.
Wait, so the painting doesn't change, but you're saying somebody is sitting in this same praying position?
There is a callback. There's a
oh my God, you're so right. I remember the callback,
painting,
but not the painting. And I remember being very haunted by that little bit.
And
horrifying.
And who is it that's in that position? Is it Dorsa or someone else?
I don't know. It may be Dorsa.
I think it's Dorsa, yeah.
But
and it's really spooky looking.
So I've been trying to figure out why Samuel is important, and he's in the Bible, and he's also in the Quran, and I am just not enough of a
he's
theologian.
In the Bible and the Quran? What a real crossover success story.
There's a lot of biblical figures that appear across all the Abrahamic religions.
Good enough for me.
There is a verse...
The Abraham Cinematic Universe.
There is a verse in the Quran involving Samuel that mentions fighting in the way of God and being driven from their homes and taken from their children and stuff that seems very appropriate to the themes of this movie. I don't know. I can't figure it out, so I'm just going to throw it out there, and maybe one of our listeners will know.
Because I sure as fuck don't. But it's fascinating.
How does the story of Samuel relate to this movie? Whether it's a Christian or an Islam interpretation, and what does the ghoulish inversion of that painting mean to the themes of this movie?
Listeners, if you know anything about this, send us an email.
You can
comment on our social media, hashtag What's Up with Samuel.
Joseph,
we often invite you to troll us, but like, please don't troll us about this topic.
Yeah, keep it real. Be serious. Like,
serious.
This is
I need citations,
straight
footnotes.
answers.
I want to say
Joseph
something.
Campbell, if you're out there, drop us a line.
So, I wonder if there's not a whole other set of layers about this movie that I'm missing out on for knowing nothing about the Iran-Iraq war.
Could be.
I wonder if some of the imagery is like, if you went through that, if you lived in Iran or Iraq, you would be like, oh, well, obviously this whole thread is like a reference to that crazy thing that happened.
There's a lot of American movies you would not be able to parse if you didn't know everything about 9/11.
Yeah, and that's a fun thing. Like, I try to be aware of my own biases as much as possible, and like, I cannot watch an American-made movie without at some point during it thinking, if I was from Japan and I was watching this movie, or anywhere, like, this would make no sense to me, which has given me more patience in watching foreign films in general.
Yeah.
Like, thinking like, all right, I'm just going to try and like figure out what this is and do the research and like trying to get as close to an approximation of appreciating it like from its native origin as possible. But this is a movie where, like, I don't know, it seems so rich in like thematic detail, in like mise en scène, in symbolism, that there's probably a ton of shit that would just go over my head.
There's something there, and it's deliberate, because actually the first thing I found when I Google imaged that painting was that the painting was commissioned specifically for this movie to match that historical painting. So they actually had a replica painting commissioned to put on the wall.
So that's important.
So it's
important. That was a choice.
It's a choice, and then it comes back later.
You know, not to put too fine a point on this or to bring things back around to something we discussed earlier, but another spooky thing I watched recently was Room 237, the Rodney Asher film, director.
Oh, you think we're going off the
Nightmare.
rails right now?
Oh, hold on. I'm getting to my point. Director of The Nightmare, who made the movie about The Shining and the various outlandish fan theories about it. And my point is, I think you're going off the rails here.
I don't think we are. We're talking about the facts, and I think this movie was very intentionally made.
We'll see. Well, we're gonna find an interview, and the guy's gonna be like, "Just a ghost story, man."
You know what?
One final detail that I learned in my minimal research I did: the actress who plays Sheeta grew up in Iran during the Iran-Iraq War.
Oh, wow.
And hid from missile strikes with her mother in the basement of their building.
Wow.
There's a lot of, they're like one thing that I feel like anybody watching this movie, if you take one thing away from it and you don't like that it's a slow burn, that you're expecting a horror movie and it takes a while to become one, or you don't even think it is when it does, just the day-to-day reality of the bombs dropping and the frequent sort of like act breaks where we see Sheeta and her daughter, and like there's a neighbor that's like she's the one who ends up moving to France, who seems very, very just sort of like a kindly, knowledgeable older woman, just sitting on like the dirt floor of the basement, just chatting. The alarms go off and they just sit down there and chat, and they don't really fret about anything. They just know that it's like a fire drill almost for them. It's so normal. And like that is chilling in and of itself. I kept thinking like, my God, I feel like these characters are in more danger than they realize, and I'm waiting for this movie to drop that on them.
And it's the horrifying thing is that's how millions of people are living around the world.
It's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
I feel like what a great conversation for an hour and 24-minute movie. So much more we could talk about.
I could go on.
I feel like we've talked for more than an hour and 24 minutes, potentially.
We possibly have. And I could go on for another half hour. But
so what the fuck are we watching next?
What are we watching next, Chris?
All right. Well, we've all got our chance to pick a movie. So, of course, we're going to defer to the Wheel of Death.
Is that our new format? So we're each picking a movie, and then the Wheel of Death picks a movie for us every fourth episode.
Yep.
Right? Is
that the way,
idea?
Wheel of Death is basically the silent partner of the show.
It is the symbol of random chance and chaos.
It's the Joker of the show.
It's the Joker of our show. So, Netflix for this Halloween season has introduced a new category. Spooky season has introduced a new category called Netflix and Chills. See what they did there? And so
like multiple sessions of sex while you're watching these films.
Yeah, and I really don't know the intention of this category. It seems to be a semi-curated selection of accessible horror stuff. If you want to see something scary on Netflix, you can go to this category and not have to do the work.
Because Scream 2 is on the list.
Yeah.
Against a bunch of like original movies.
Oh, so it's not... So my assumption was that this was all original movies that they were releasing specifically this Halloween season for this section, but
there's a handful. Some are movies that are new to Netflix, and then there's Scream 2. I don't know what that is. And then there's one about prank. There's a
potpourri. One of the movies of interest to our listeners maybe is a sequel to A Haunting at Silver Falls.
What?
Which is very new.
Is it called A Haunting at Silver Falls?
A Haunting at Silver Falls: The Return.
Wow.
Holy fucking shit.
Guys,
is that on the Wheel of Death?
Can we just
not?
When does it come
out? We could add it. It's out now.
No, that's okay.
No, put it on there.
All right, we're going to put it on there. So right now we are loading. We have our...
I'm going to kill you, Steven.
Right now, there are going to be 3 Netflix original movies in the Netflix and Chills category before we do our next episode. They are In the Shadow of the Moon, which is...
Oh, man.
Like he's tracking a serial killer or something.
I heard it's pretty bad.
Fractured, which is Sam Worthington in a hospital that may be up to no good, something like that. And then In the Tall Grass, which Steven knows more about.
I didn't know In the Shadow of the Moon was in this category as well. These are all movies that like have recently gotten festival reviews from like TIFF or Beyond Fest, and they all sound very divisive, which means I wouldn't mind watching any one of them, if not all 3. I'm sure we're going to have some pretty interesting discussions.
All right, so we got 4 potential movies on the wheel, all from the new Netflix and Chills category. We're going to spin the old wheel and see what the hell we're watching.
Wait, so what are the 4 selections? Fractured, In the Tall Grass, In the Shadow of the Moon, and what's the other one?
A Haunting at Silver Falls: The Return.
Oh, okay, right.
I just put it back on there. All right, let's give this thing a crank.
I'm going to regret that I know it.
Oh, I can't wait to watch it.
Oh, my God.
Giving it a crank. It's going.
It's going to be Haunting at Silver Falls.
I hope so.
Oh, it's actually the one I wanted to see.
Oh, In the Shadow of the Moon.
Oh, no, that's not the one I wanted to see.
You wanted In the Tall Grass.
But I wanted to see it more. Yeah, I wanted to see Tall Grass.
You wanted to get into something.
In the Shadow of the Moon. Great.
Okay, well, I'm still going to watch Fractured and In the Tall Grass. We're just... maybe I'll talk about them on the show.
I'll probably watch some of them, yeah.
Sure.
All right, well, guys, it's been a great discussion. We've had a lot of fun, as usual. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We are... You need to do this, Patrick.
Amon Cast. EHMON Cast.
I'm not much of
comment,
a...
like, follow, go on iTunes, leave us a little fucking review.
Yeah, leave us a review. Some of you have been leaving reviews. Just know that it's noticed and appreciated.
And they've been beautiful. Thank you for those reviews. Like, some of you have left things that touched me way more than I anticipated.
I forget because I'm so like
people listen and they like this.
I'm so disengaged from social media that I don't realize that people actually listen to this show. We've gotten some beautiful fan art messages, questions through Facebook.
Oh yeah, fan art. We want more fan art.
And you know what? I'm really curious to hear people's takes on this movie and what all this shit means.
Yeah,
because I mean, we're still getting mail about Baskin. And all the symbolism in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, shit. So, I need to engage with this stuff more. But you know what? Reach out to us because it does mean a lot, and we will respond. We don't... I mean, we have lives, but we don't have lives.
Well, we might not respond, but we'll at least read your comments on the show.
We'll respond eventually, maybe.
I mean,
I'll pick up the slack.
I really enjoyed all the thoughts that people had on The Perfection, which was such a divisive movie for us, and people had such interesting and diverse opinions on that movie. I really enjoyed reading those. So if you see Under the Shadow, tell us what you thought.
Yeah, well, happy start to the spooky season. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
For some Netflix and chills.
For every horror movie on Netflix, I'm Steven.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Patrick.
Bye.